Thank you.
1 second, sir. Executive Committee, May 12th, 2020. Yeah, good, thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. We have, we'll call the meeting to order, the Executive Committee this Tuesday, May 12th, 2020. We have 9 members present. We do have a quorum. Item number 2 on your agenda is approval of the minutes of April 14th, 2020 of our regular meeting. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by member Paisley. Is there a second? Second by member Barnett. Any comments or questions or additions or corrections? If none, all in favor, please raise your hand. And opposed, the same. And motion carries. We have 4 members of the public who have submitted something to be read. And I'll ask Mrs. Morlock to come to the podium. The first member that submitted something is Mrs. Denise Bilski.
Good evening, and I'm going to apologize. I didn't get to practice. So, from Denise Bilski, while addressing the DCEO Downstate Small Business Stabilization Program on Wednesday, May 6th, the Finance Committee ultimately decided to bring this item to the Executive Committee for further discussion. I would like to address a surface concern raised by some committee members regarding the general concern about the county liability of defaulted grant balances. Number 1, this is a grant program and not a loan. The business does not need to repay this so long as they comply with the program's guidelines. The program has highly extensive eligibility requirements which are unique to this program, further reducing the likelihood of a business being non-compliant. For example, if a grantee closed their business after receiving the grant funds, the DCEO would consider this to be defaulting. To combat this from happening, the DCEO requires that a grant-eligible business has had either a positive NOI or a positive trending NOI for the last 3 years. Number 2, although the DCEO can award up to $25,000, it is unlikely that this will be awarded. In the application, a business must use their January 2020 actual expenses to support the amount of funds they're asking for. Lastly, number 3, according to Mr. Patrick Hoban, he is aware of only 2 interested businesses as of Wednesday, May 6th. Contributing to this low number are 2 important factors. 1, businesses within the city limits of Bloomington and Normal are ineligible to participate. 2, businesses within eligible towns may participate directly through their town. The county's direct involvement with this grant would be in support of businesses that are located in unincorporated McLean County and left without a smaller unit of local government. As you continue to discuss county participation in this program, I ask you to please remember that many of the existing financial relief efforts are in fact loans. They are in extreme demand, are focused on fixed expenses, and leave small businesses that have applied suspended in uncertainty. Although burdened with caveats and particulars, this program is geared towards helping the small businesses that cannot compete for larger relief packages. The DCEO prepared 2 helpful webinars that each finish with live Q&A covering all corners of this program and are available on their website. Remaining questions can be answered by Dana Houston, our local area grant manager. From my husband and I at Moraine View Restaurant and Kayak Rental, thank you, Patrick Hoban. Thank you, Chairman McIntyre. Thank you, Vice Chairman Solner. And more thanks to all involved staff for reviewing the program's details despite the very long webinars and guidebook. Denise Bilski. The second one that was submitted was a Becky Hines. That's regarding the legislative agenda. Dear Chairman McIntyre and members of the Executive Committee, 2020 marks the 100th anniversary of the founding of the League of Women Voters and the ratification of the 19th Amendment giving women the right to vote. The League continues to believe in the power of the vote, that voting is a fundamental right and that all eligible voters should be able to exercise that right. In the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, it is imperative that we have safe ways for people to vote without fearing for their personal safety. Vote by mail will not replace in-person voting, but will be an added option for registered voters to cast a ballot. As a nonpartisan political organization that encourages active participation in government, the League of Women Voters of McLean County encourages the McLean County Board to include language in the legislative agenda to support federal and state legislation that requires all authorities to send vote-by-mail applications to all registered voters and provides funding to do so. We realize that working out the logistics to execute this agenda item will take time and resources. The League of Women Voters is ready to assist to educate the public on their options. As our League of Women Voters USA CEO, Virginia Case, summed it up, just as generations before us have met the challenges of their time, so shall we, and the League of Women Voters is committed to ensuring our elections remain safe and accessible to all. Sincerely, Becky Hines, President of the League of Women Voters of McLean County. The third one is from Janine Toth. I am writing to the attention of the Executive Committee of the McLean County Board as a member of the McLean County League of Women Voters in support of our position that the legislative agenda include a request for resources to send vote-by-mail applications for all voters. Further, I am in support of federal and state legislation that requires all election authorities to send vote-by-mail applications to all registered voters and provide funding to do so. And the last one is basically just another support. It's Anita Carney saying that she also supports, I support mail-in voting. Thank you, Anita Carney.
Thank you, Mr. Morlock. We will move on to item number 4 on your agenda, departmental matters versus executive committee report. A1A, we have no appointments to approve. We do have 2 reappointments to approve, and they're before you. What say you? Do I have a motion to approve? Motion by member Schaefer, second by member Metzger. Comments or questions? Discussion? If none, all in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Opposed? Same sign. The motion is approved. We're going to item C, is a request approval of the 2020 legislative program that is submitted to us for approval by our legislative subcommittee. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by member Gordon, second. Second by member Woolrath. Comments or questions? Member Solner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe that member Beard wanted to speak to this. I don't know if you're going to allow him or not, or if I need to speak for him.
Well, I'm looking for Mr. Beard to see if he's raising his hand. Hang on for a minute. Member Beard, would you like to be recognized?
Yes, sir. At your pleasure. Yeah. Thank you for allowing me to speak. And I'll try to be brief. I'm requesting to talk after listening to both of the meetings held by the legislative subcommittee and reviewing the approved program. I think it's clear that there is additional work needed before the county approves this program. In prior years, this legislative program has addressed specific bills or issues that directly impact the operations of county government. This year, some of the additions have little to no impact of the operations of our government, but instead would only impact the residents of the county. So as we get further away from nuts and bolts issues, it becomes a more divided agenda. And I think that can be observed by the vote, a split vote that came out of committee, whereas this had traditionally been something that was passed unanimously. So with that said, my comments are around 3 sections that I would propose be removed: the property tax, fair maps, and renewable energy sections, on grounds that they are simply outside of the scope of county government and not based on the merits of those particular items. However, I do also want to specifically call out the renewable energy item due to the merits of what is listed. The legislation referenced, the CEJA and the Path to 100, those are both partisan bills. The 2019 versions were not supported by our area legislators. They are not supported by the Illinois Chamber of Commerce. And specific to the CEJA, that the only reason that would come up in 2019, or excuse me, 2020, is due to a unique issue to Northern Illinois and their desire to get out of the PJM transmission organization. It is about utility rates in Northern Illinois. That is one of the driving pushes for this legislation and why it's trying to get passed before June 1st. So I would propose that even if there are some components of what is potentially a huge bill that could affect residents of McLean County, to, as an organization, stand behind either of those bills would be inappropriate. And I think if we want to go in a direction where where we support bills that we like, that we think would be beneficial for residents, rather than support bills that we think would be beneficial for the county government, that gets to be a different list, a more partisan list. So again, in summary, I would ask today that those 3 items in particular be removed to be able to pass a more universally approved and bipartisan and unanimous program. Thank you.
Let me see if I understand the 3 topics on the agenda or on the legislative program. Did you say property tax?
Yeah, the property tax, the fair maps, and the renewable energy. And again, not on the merits. Hey, I'm with you. Our property taxes are too high. We should have fair maps, but the impact to county government is minimal. There's nothing before us that we'll be voting on regarding property taxes for schools, which is what this talks about.
Well, operationally, I would like to ask you to we decide on these one at a time. And I would like if you would like, you'll have to propose an amendment to this action item, and I'll have to deal with them one at a time. So if you'd like to do that, we'll go that route so that they can be discussed.
Well, I guess I'll start with, most of my research was on the renewable energy one. So I would propose simply that be removed. If there is not a majority for that, sir, I have prepared alternate language that I believe you have and Vice Chairman Solner have to support a more bipartisan program. But my initial request is that simply that section be removed.
All right, so there is a motion to amend. Is there a second with the removal of renewable energy?
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
I can't make a motion, by the way.
Right.
You cannot make a motion. Is there someone that would make a motion to amend this? Member Mesker, is there a second? Member Erickson? The motion to remove out the topic renewable energy from our legislative program. Is there more discussion? Member Schaefer?
On all 3 of these, one of the things that Member Beard was saying was that maybe it needs more work. So are we looking at just removing these things and then going forward with what is left? Or are we going to try to rework these that have different language in them based on any further discussion? I guess that's trying to want to know where we're going on how we're going to do this.
Member Beard, you mentioned that if this did not pass majority, you could come back with rewording on this. I'm going to recommend that if it does not pass and it is removed from this legislative program, that you bring it back to the full board or to stand up with wording. Just for expediency's sake at this time.
Chair,
I'm sorry, as point of order, Member Woolrapp.
point of order. You are relating to Mr. Beard as though he's a member of this committee. And in the past, we have not allowed committee members to interact to this level before. And I'm wondering why, he is interacting now as though he's a standing official member of this committee. And I'm opposed to that.
Point well taken. It's definitely my error. I looked at the screen, saw all the members and didn't realize at that time that he is not a member, and I stand corrected for that. There was a motion made that he presented to us. I'm in error in calling on him at the time. So I believe Mr. Solner did recommend that he speak. It's the chairman's discretion whether or not somebody can speak, which he did. The motion was made, I believe. So we'll move on from there, and I stand corrected. I believe, though, we can move on at this time. Thank you. There is still a motion. Is there discussion? Member Woolrat.
Yes, I'd just like to speak, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to speak to the general premise that we should not be bringing these legislative initiatives to our legislature. This is one, these things relate to our constituents, our residents. It's one time where we have the ability to speak as a board, as a unit in communicating with our legislature. So the fact that they may not relate 100% completely to our business, I think is, not of concern right now. I think we should take forth and have these discussions with our legislature.
Thank you, but this is submitted by the subcommittee of our executive committee for approval. And so we are still on this one amendment for discussion. Member Casely.
I think that we should not spend a lot of time on this item because I don't think it's going to make any difference whatever. The legislature has to wind up its business by May 31st. They have not been in session. They have been in derogation of their duty by not being in session all spring, and there is not enough time to take up all of these items on our legislative agenda that we're going to make any difference at this point. I think that it's futile for us to spend a great deal of time on this. And I would move to just table it and go on to the next item.
Well, we do have a motion, an amendment to discuss right now. Unless you're moving to table this amendment, then I'm going to take a vote on this, and then I won't entertain the other motions that came because they weren't from a member of the committee, and we'll go on back and we'll vet the rest of this plan at this time. Member Barnett. Is this for discussion on this amendment to remove renewable energy? Thank you.
I can't speak to some of the details about the CEJA legislation that Member Beard had brought up. I wasn't familiar with some of that, but I will say I've sat in a couple meetings about some of these proposals, and it's my understanding that as the legislative language that we have here suggests, this program would set up training centers around the state for renewable energy jobs. And to me, that's something I would like to see happen in McLean County. And so I guess I would be supportive of leaving this on the legislative agenda if there's any hope that this may eventually pass the legislature, create a training center in Bloomington Normal, and help to further diversify our workforce.
Okay, is there any other discussion on this motion to amend? Member Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My understanding is a little different, I think, from the understanding that Member Beard articulated. Nuts and bolts concerns for county government are obviously at the center of what we want our legislature to be aware of. How narrowly we define that, or how broadly we define that, can depend on how each of us thinks of it. I think what Member Barnett just pointed out about the renewable energy matter is quite a cogent observation, and there is a reference in the renewable energy in the second line of the topic in our packet. There's a phrase: its presence as a lucrative tax generator and job sector. Those have to do with nuts and bolts of county government, and I have not understood that we are talking on the legislative subcommittee, and I'm a member of it. I have never understood that we're looking only at the focus on county government and not at county residents who, in my view, are part of county government. So that I would be inclined to vote no on the amendment and keep not only this one, but the others that Member Beard referenced, if only because I think nuts and bolts can be broadly defined, and I think more broadly than Member Beard suggested.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments? If none, I'm going to call the question on the amendment. All in favor of removing this as was suggested, removing the topic renewable energy from our McLean County Registry program, raise your hand. 2, 3, hands. 3 ayes. Opposed? 2. Please keep your hands up. We're recording.
So, and that was Barnett.
Gordon and Woolrab.
Who is not on here? Well,
Mr. Erickson. And who else?
Oh, Mr. Erickson would have to voice vote.
Mr. Erickson, could you voice vote for us? There you are.
Okay.
He's voting no.
Can he make a yes, no sign? I mean, like,
Okay. Mr. Erickson, we cannot hear you. Can you hear me? If so, I'm going to ask you to thumbs up or thumbs down. Are you voting in favor of the amendment to remove this item or opposed? Voting in favor, so that I have 4 yeses and 3 noes. Is that correct?
Yes,
Yes.
I have 4 yeses, Casely, Metzger, Schaefer, Erickson. 3 noes, Barnett, Gordon, Woolrab.
Okay, so we have 4 yeses and 3 noes. The amendment carries. Now we're back to the original proposal to accept the rest of the legislative program. I won't entertain the amendment from Mr. Beard at the time. Are there any other amendments to be presented? If not, then I will call the vote on, I'm sorry, Member Solon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I apologize. We did go through this quite a bit at our legislative session, but I had concerns. It's the very last item. It's on page 13, topic voter by mail applications. My concern is when we discussed this at our legislative committee meeting, I was under the impression that County Clerk Kathy Michael was in favor of this. Since then, she informed me that evidently whatever information I got from the media was wrong and that she is not in favor of this. So because of that, I want to strike that whole paragraph from this program. That's a motion.
That's a motion to amend. Is there a second? Member Casely seconds. This is a motion to remove the topic vote by mail applications this is the last item on page 13. Comments or discussion? Member Casely?
I have received a telephone call from Member Went, who is very strongly opposed to this. And it has been my experience from hearing several election contest cases in the circuit court that voting by mail, voting absentee is subject to a lot more allegations of error than voting in person. And furthermore, it lessens the possibility of voter fraud, particularly chain voting and purchasing votes. And therefore, I think that there are many ways of voting. You can vote absentee, you can vote early, and sending an application for a ballot in the mail does not seem to me to be a good thing from those viewpoints. But Member Went is most concerned about the cost of it. He thinks it would be a great cost. And I don't know about the cost, but I think there are good reasons not to support this amendment.
Thank you. Any more comments or discussion? Member Gordon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to respectfully disagree with both Member Casely and Member Went. I guess it's a 2-for-1. Right now, there are 5 states in the union that use vote by mail extensively. 3 of them are red states, as it happens. And in those 3 states and the other 2 that are so-called blue states, there is strong bipartisan support for vote by mail. We had some discussion on this previously, obviously, in legislative subcommittee. And the concern about cost involved some comments from both Mr. Went and Mr. Robustelli, who had rather starkly different understandings of what the costs might be. Member Robustelli had some numbers that were at hand, and the total cost that he mentioned was something in the neighborhood of 19 or 20,000, assuming bulk mail rates are used. And those numbers also are perhaps interesting, I hope they are, because they take into account the costs of postage in multiple directions. Postage, getting the request for application, getting the application to the voter, and then the subsequent steps for getting the mail vote actually cast. Under some circumstances, I might not feel this strongly. In the COVID-19 circumstance, as we have seen already in at least one other state in the primary election, I'm talking about our good neighbor to the north, the state of Wisconsin, there were a fair number of voters there who stood in line and voted. The numbers are not hard and fast. I don't know them by heart, but there were a lot of voters who felt there and then, and there are a lot of voters who feel elsewhere. And in subsequent primaries, and obviously for the November election, there are a lot of folks who just don't want to be faced with the choice between exercising an essential right of democratic government, on the one hand, casting your vote, and having to choose between that and heightened risk of medical difficulties, real difficulties. COVID-19 is nothing to be joked about, and nobody here is. I'm aware of that. But I would be inclined to not delete this from our legislative agenda because this is a particularly difficult set of circumstances we're trying to get through. And we have an election coming up in November. Do I need to remind anyone? And the experience in the 5 states that use vote by mail, not exclusively, but very extensively, suggests that people on both sides of the aisle can be supportive of it. One of the things that concerns me is, frankly, the uptick in COVID-19 cases in rural areas. And we may be starting to plateau or maybe even decline in some heavily populated urban areas. And we're starting to see upticks in the very rural areas, the very areas where legislators might be assuming that we're not going to be having these problems. And in fact, we are. So that vote by mail adds an option. It is not a requirement. People can still choose to use absentee ballots. They can do early voting in Illinois. We can do in-person voting. This adds an option for people who may be in populations considered particularly vulnerable, and I would oppose deleting this from our legislative program.
Thank you. Other comments? Member Solmer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to remind members, this does not preclude or cause anyone to not have the right to vote by mail. All this does is it prevents us from spending the money to send an application or a notice for an application. So again, in the past, I think the parties have done the job of making voters aware that there was an opportunity to vote by mail. I know that the county clerk does that on her website. So again, all this does is not, it asks our legislators, or it would ask our legislators to promote the idea of an application for mail-in ballots. So it's not really affecting the actual vote. Thank you.
Any other comments or discussion? Member Metzger?
I guess I'm a bit confused because you can get an absentee ballot through the mail and still vote. Am I not correct? So I guess I'm confused that we have to have vote by mail if we already have a vote by mail option.
This is requiring all election authorities to send vote by mail applications to all registered voters and provides funding to do so automatically. Member Woolrap?
Yes, the proposal that's in the packet is a recommendation that that we support federal and state legislation that would pay for, we would request the funding through them. And what I would like to say is that I wouldn't think that it would be proactive to think about the need to do this because so many of our election judges are of an elderly age, and I don't know at this point exactly where we're at with getting election judges, but I'm wondering how many of them will decline to serve this year because of the pandemic. Finally, I just want to say, if we're concerned about cost, and it wouldn't be out of the same bucket at all, I realize that, but the cost of one hospital stay for one COVID patient in an ICU for a number of days would be at least equal, if not exceed, the cost of mailing these ballots to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Member Kaisley?
Well, remember, a member of this committee, he would point out that Member Robustelli's cost comment was related strictly to the postage and not to the time that would be spent in the county clerk's office preparing the documents and then addressing the envelopes and sending them on to the voters. And of course, the cost of paper goods and so forth as well. And Member Wendt commented on that when he appeared and testified before the subcommittee on legislation.
Thank you. Member Schaefer?
I think that we're getting too deep into the details of what the county clerk does and how it could be worked and how it wouldn't work and that kind of thing for this, because this is just what we're proposing to send to our legislators for them to know how we feel about things. And I think that we're starting to get too deep into actual process and reasons and stuff like that. So I think that we're going too far into that conversation, and that would be under what would come under finance if finance wanted to pursue this, not necessarily to pursue it in a way that it's not even legislated that way.
Thank you. With that being said, I'm going to call a question on this amendment to remove the topic vote by mail from our McLean County legislative program.
Roll call vote, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, hang on, we'll see how we can execute this. Thank you. Chairman vote.
So if we vote yes, it's a yes to remove it from the
Yes.
legislative agenda.
Yes.
Okay. Member Metzger? Member Woolrab? Are you voting yes or no?
No.
Thank you. Member Schaefer? Yes.
We're
I guess you know what?
gonna need it.
Put your thumb up or your thumb down. That would help.
Either we're gonna need a verbal vote. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Member Erickson?
Yes.
Member Kaisley?
Yes.
Member Gordon?
No,
Member Soldner?
Yes.
Member Barnett?
No.
Member McIntyre?
Yes. Not counting.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6 yeses. and
6
1, 2,
yes and
3.
3 no. So the motion to amend carries. Are there any other amendments at this time? Member Schaefer?
Yes, I'd like to remove the Fair Maps Initiative. That right now, from my understanding, is not possible to be a constitutional amendment. And there's not enough time left in the legislative session to do that. So I don't know, and I don't really think that they're probably going to address it if they even meet this summer. So I think that, and actually some of the groups that have been focusing on getting that passed have conceded that there's not enough time left to actually get that accomplished. So I'd like to remove that so that way we just don't clutter up the agenda that we're presenting.
Motion by member Schaefer to remove the topic Fair Maps Initiative. Is there a second? Second by member Metzger. Comments or discussion? Member Barnett?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Isn't it standard practice that we do leave things on the legislative agenda year after year, even if they aren't passed in the legislative, in the General Assembly that year? We just sort of leave them on there as an ongoing initiative that the county is wanting to see happen.
Standard practice from the county or from the state as far as leaving it on the agenda?
Well, from the county, I mean, a number of the items that are on our legislative agenda were on there in 19, they were on there in 18, and I guess I'm just thinking, even if we don't think fair maps will necessarily get done this year, I don't see the harm in leaving it on as putting our flag on the ground and rolling it next year, maybe into 2021 as well.
Well, that's up to the committee here on whether or not they approve this. Otherwise, it's my interpretation that what is submitted here is going to the full board for vote from an executive committee. And there is no standard practice as far as rules go on doing this. Thank you. Member Schaefer?
In most cases, I would agree with you, Mr. Barnett, but since this only happens once every 10 years, I'm not sure that we want to have this on there for the next 10 years when it's really, next year it will be irrelevant for another 9 years, even though people are still want that kind of thing. Once it gets done, once the redistricting gets done and the maps are made, then it doesn't happen for another 10 years. So I guess that's my only thing is that why would we want to?
How redistricting works. I mean, I get that there's a census coming up, but this has been talked about for a number of years outside of the last census that was a decade ago. So I think the chances of it being brought forward at some point again in the future are probably pretty high. But
My interpretation would be, though, that things change and we tailor make this. And one reason we have a legislative subcommittee is to look at the situations that are presented to us that will come to the legislature each year. And so I'm not sure that how many we've left on. We could go back and check. But that's my interpretation at this time. Is there any other discussion on this to remove? If not, all in favor of removing the topic Fair Maps Initiative, please raise your hand. 1, 2. I'll vote yes.
Metzger, Schaefer,
McIntyre.
And McIntyre.
Yeah.
and McIntyre.
Opposed? 1, 2. Is that 3, 4? Have you got those down? Okay.
Will Rabbit Erickson, Casey. Brown.
So the motion is defeated. We'll leave the topic Fair Maps Initiative on this legislative subcommittee. Are there any other amendments at this time? Member Gordon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is actually not an amendment. This is an inquiry because I am puzzled. I am not sure that I understand, and I hope that someone can help me, what the decision was that we made earlier with regard to the renewable energy. I'm not clear on where we came out, on whether we voted to delete that or voted not to delete that. And I want to go back. I want to go back and be sure. I may be the only one who's not clear on it.
The motion was to remove, and there were 4 yes, or no, yeah.
Yes.
Kaisley, Metzger, Schaefer, Erickson was a yes to remove.
The
So it
motion-
passed.
The motion to remove carried and it did pass. So the renewable energy item on topic on your legislative program will be removed this time.
So were the names that Ms. Morlock just read,
Yes.
were those accurate? That's all I'm asking.
For the accuracy. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I actually voted to remove it also.
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't say Mr. Soldner's name. I apologize. The motion to amend that was brought by Metzger and Erickson was to remove the renewable energy. The votes to remove, saying yes to remove it, were Kaisley, Metzger, Schaefer, Erickson, and Soldner. That's what I had down. If I got it wrong, I apologize.
Thank you. I'm not saying you had it wrong. I'm saying I had it unclear. Thank you.
Well, the vote was 5-3. The chairman did not vote. Any other amendments this time? If not, I'll call the question. The original motion to pass the McLean County Legislative Program as presented. All in favor of the motion as amended, or the legislative program as amended? Please raise your hand so we can see. Please put your hands up. We can see them. We're having a little difficulty. 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, 6 yeses. Opposed? And 2 noes. Thank you. Motion carried.
Okay.
Member Woolrabbit and Member Gordon voted no. Let me move on to item D, was the request of approval of software enhancement with Caliber Public Safety Information Technology Department. And with your permission, I would like to combine D and E, which is the appropriation for the same. I'll be happy to separate those if necessary. Is there any objection? If not, is there a motion to approve items D and E? I need a motion to approve. Motion by Member Barnett. Is there a second? Second by Member Schaefer. Comments or questions? Member Woolrabbit.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering whether, I guess what I'm looking at long-term here is, or medium-term, is if we can get away this year without actually making this change to the system. So my questions are 2, what grants would be at risk if we failed to do this? And the second one being, isn't there any likelihood that the requirement to have this done by January 1st of 2021 may be extended in light of all the things going on with COVID and so forth? And I'm going to make a proposal that we hold this over for a month in order to get those 2 questions answered. If somebody can contact somebody in the federal government and find out if we really our feet are going to be held to the fire to do this year. And, what are the grants? What are we looking at cost-wise in the grants that we could potentially lose if we don't meet the standard? Thanks.
I'd like to refer your question to Mr. Nelson, with your permission.
Sure, those are good and valid questions. I have been checking regularly, meaning weekly, the FBI website that directs this part of the neighbors question. And so far, they have not changed the date that's on that website. As to whether they will in the future, your guess is as good as mine. In terms of the grants, I don't know exactly how to go about gathering that, because each grant will have to be reviewed individually in its wording to see whether the contingency of that is based upon the crime reporting. What I do know is that if the UCR, which is the current form of crime reporting, will be discontinued at the end of this year. And if we don't have a replacement in place with neighbors, then McLean County's statistics will not be reported to the federal level.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Member Wolrab?
Chair, well, I would think, given that we're looking at over $110,000 in cost here, if at all possible, I think it'd be worth reaching out and finding out if this deadline is going to be held to, and then trying to make a decision from that point on as to whether we're going to try to comply with it. It's just, one more item to spend those we didn't budget for, as a matter of fact, and in light of everything budget-wise, I think we have to be super careful with everything we're doing.
If I may, sir.
Yeah, I have a question for you too, so go ahead and respond.
Okay. Yeah, I did just want to point out that these funds are proposed to come from the shared sales tax fund. And one of the only four purposes for which the fund is established is to work with electronic systems. So this would not actually impact the general fund if that's, if that's something that makes a difference in the decision making.
My question of you would be, when was it first that we became aware of the FBI changing their system?
They've been touting it a long time, but honestly, we didn't see it as something that was urgent or needed until we actually did our reviews of Aegis with Mr. Kalin, who you see in your tiles. And he'll be presenting more on that process later. So.
Any other comments? Member Wolrab, are you proposing any action, or do you want more comments on this, or just giving direction?
I was proposing that we hold it over for a month and try to get those questions answered.
Do you want to make that in a form of a motion to table for a date certain?
I do. Thank you.
Member Wolrab proposes an amendment, or proposes that we table this item, these two items, until next month's meeting, executive committee meeting 1 month from now. Is there a second? Member Gordon, a second. Comments or questions about the motion to table? Member Metzger?
If we table this to find out the additional information, what risk do we have? And I'm asking Mr. Nelson if there is some risk of, and my other question would be if this Aegis replacement, $100,000, is this something that will be rolled into that? So we wouldn't be throwing $100,000 out the window, or is this something that we can roll in and would be useful moving forward?
So as for your first question for the risk, again, that really ties back to how stringent the grant givers will be on the money and the requirements, and we have no way of knowing what the grant evaluators will do with that. In terms of timing with risk, we had actually hoped to get this here last month, but COVID kind of put things in our way. And so it will be an all-out effort to get this done by January 1st as is at this point. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the last question that you asked me.
The last question was, is this something that would be integrated into the future system?
No, it won't be. This system is a standalone system. It would keep us current, but the implementation of any new system will take a substantial time frame. And so this would probably still be in place for minimum of 2 years.
So what's the, if we put dollars and cents to this, then we're spending $50,000 a year so we can do reporting, and how does that benefit us?
The risk of not reporting is that we may be found ineligible for federal grant monies that come through the Burton grants, the JAG grants, and the Bureau of Justice.
Would $50,000 or $100,000 be offset by that? I mean, are we getting more than $100,000 in grants is my question.
Ms. Taylor, come up.
Yeah, Justin, would you like? I know that we received more than that in grants.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, to answer your question, Member Metzger, we do receive much more than that in our federal grants, our JAG grants, our BJA grants, our SAMHSA grants. The ones that I can think of off the top of my head would be in excess of $500,000 a year.
Member Schaefer. We're
I'm
on
gonna,
top.
I'm gonna support
Table.
this. But the question I have is, and depending upon how this vote goes, Member Wolrab asked to put it off a month. Is that what you?
That's the
why
motion
would-
to,
Yeah, why would we not just wait for a stand up and ask for that information? Although I think we've got some of this answers that you were looking for already with what Mr. Nelson and Ms. Taylor said as to how much our grants are and things like that. But after what Mr. Nelson said about how long it would take and trying to get it done by the end of the year, would it not be better just to try to get it done at stand up? If the vote falls that way.
That I would be amenable to that if Mr. Nelson could reach out to find the right contact in the federal government and to ask them and to plead with them, that we wouldn't have to do this year. And I imagine we wouldn't be the only ones in that situation.
would you withdraw be willing to withdraw your motion then at this time?
I would make a change
Table,
to say that we would postpone it to stand up.
postpone it to stand-up meeting. Member Gordon, seconded that motion, I believe. Is that okay with you? The recommendation to postpone? Okay, anyone else? Thanks for complicating this for me a little more. We'll figure it out here as we go. So I'm gonna have a motion to, you want to just change that to table to the date certain to stand-up meeting? Or we'll just create the wording that way. Member Gordon, is that satisfactory with you for a second? So a motion to table to our stand-up meeting, refer this action item. All in favor, please raise your hand.
Opposed, I can't see. No, everybody's for it.
Opposed? I agree. Okay, motion has carried. We'll move on to items. I'm sorry, there's a motion to carry. Yeah, that's fine. Move on to items F. Request approval of an amendment to the Bloomington Normal Enterprise Zone Intergovernmental Agreement found on pages 27 and 28. I believe we can combine those with your approval items F and G at this time. Is there an objection? If not, is there a motion? Motion by member Solner, second by member Barnett. Comments or questions? Member Kaisley.
How many of the square miles in the zone, in the enterprise zone, have we used up? Are we getting close to our maximum?
Mr. Patrick Holman is joining us, Director of Economic Development Council. Mr. Holman, I'll give you the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. The total existing zone right now is 14.5 square miles. That we're allotted 15 square miles. So by adding this, it'll actually be adding 0.086 square miles, which will leave us with about 0.76 square miles or 489 acres remaining.
Any other questions?
We're getting close then to the maximum?
Yeah, we're 489 acres away from the maximum.
Okay. Are there areas that we could take out of the zone, which are things that we've inherited from past years?
Yes, whenever this was put in, I believe the application was made in 2016. I took a look at some of the areas around the airport, and you'll see that there's parts of the zone that are actually in the direct flight path I don't think can be developed. So I think, if we do come up to another one that's going to exceed 489 acres, maybe we can talk about removing some of that land that is in the flight path over at the airport. And I'm sure there's some other areas too, maybe looking in some different neighborhoods, which would probably not have commercial development, that could be taken out as well. But I haven't really had a chance to study all the areas and why they were put in yet. But right off the bat, looking at the airport, look like some likely areas we could remove.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Member Barnett?
Just a comment, Mr. Chairman. It's exciting, especially in the current economic times, right? To see businesses interested in investing in Bloomington Normal and McLean County. So I was very excited when this project came forward, and I'm happy to support the expansion of the enterprise zone to help move the ball down the court.
Now, this is a proposed $60 million expansion of the building, which would allow for the addition of 60 jobs. Is that correct, Mr. Holden?
I believe it's up to 50, but yes.
50 jobs, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Member Solner, would you please raise your hand when you want to talk? I barely see your finger. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, the reason I made this motion, because I do think it's really important now. It's going to be tough to keep jobs the way it is. Any opportunity we have to add jobs, I think we should. It's very little cost to the county. Obviously, it's sales tax abatement. If anybody's paying attention to the news, Tesla's pulling out of California because they're not being treated well out there. And so I think we want to do whatever we could do to keep businesses here. So that's why I'm supporting.
Thank you. Any other discussion? I'll call the question of items F and G together. All in favor of approving both items, please raise your hand. Opposed? And the motion has carried. Thank you very much. Thanks for all that participation and cooperation. We'll move on to item C item 3 on our agenda, 3A Integrated Case Management System Recommendation Presentation. Mr. Robert Kalin, thank you for joining us, sir. And I'm going to give you the floor for your presentation at this time.
Thank you.
You are on.
And you should be able to see the presentation at this point.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, we can. Thank you.
All right. What I'd like to do is cover the assessment that MTG provided to McLean County. I'm going to go through the presentation fairly quickly so we can get to questions at the end of it. The agenda that I'm going to cover is really talk about what we did, walk through the critical needs and the vision that was set, discuss the options, and then talk about the comparison and open it up for questions. So we looked at all of the organization, the infrastructure, the management, the technology, and what was done with it. We looked at external factors, and we really honed down into what the strategic issues were. From that, we crafted a vision, folded in all the organizational needs, and then presented the options. So where you see this diagonal line is kind of where we stopped in the overall kind of traditional planning model. We completed numerous interviews with a number of folks, sometimes repeat interviews to make sure we understood the processes. We looked at the technology, all the high-level functions, and then got agreement on those critical issues in the vision. The critical needs that we found were that we need, and we being McLean County, need system-wide information visibility. We need several systems, a records management system for the law enforcement, a case management system for the clerk, the courts, and with e-filing information and disposition reporting. We need JMS functionality to manage the jail. We need work release management. We need juvenile processing and workflow support. That's an more integrated process than the rest of the justice system because of the, and then workload and name management workflow. The system really needs to be flexible. It needs to allow errors to be easily fixed. Right now, there are a lot of workarounds due to some of that inflexibility. And we need to be able to reclassify incidents as we investigate them and find the nature of the incident is different from what it was first reported, and that's difficult in the current system. We need improved reporting so that when we put all this information in, like incident-based reporting, which is more detailed than the UCR reporting that you're doing now, we can get it out and we can use it. And we need to the ability to connect in other information streams, particularly as the county looks to integrate health information and justice information, being able to easily fold that together. The vision is to put together a solution that has information across all the domains, that's flexible, that is easy to navigate, and easy to access from any device that the user community is using, whether it's a handheld device on a motorcycle for an officer, a police car, or an office computer, or even a tablet that a probation or parole officer may have. We want full agency level functionality. E-Justice now supports very customized functions for the agencies. We don't want to take any steps back, so that's a key factor. And we really want the ability to ingest, extract, and integrate all of our information. We really want to be able to use it. That information is the lifeblood of our criminal justice system. And so not only do we want to be able to manipulate it, but we want to be able to visualize it through dashboards, work management, and metrics, as you see here. And then lastly, the future vision has integrated training within it so that if you haven't used something in a while, there's a little training video that you can go grab and view. So it's not just usable and easy to access, but it's self-help oriented as well. Based on all of this, we looked at the market. The systems that you see here on the left are the things that would comprise this kind of a solution. The variables that you see are availability, whether they're out there or not, how many options are available, the degree of difference between the solutions out there, whether they're specialized or not, and how programmable they are. And as you can see, the big challenge is there are different offerings in each of these brackets. And as you look to put a solution together, getting the right mix of these elements are challenging. Based on this, we put together viable options, and I'll go through each of these, but basically there are four things, with the fourth item being a combination of the first two, really. So each of the options, the rebuild option is to go and take a team of developers, actually 3 teams of developers as it was estimated, and build the different components, the records management, the case management, the JMS, along primary avenues, and then the supporting tools, the DMS, integration portal, and reporting as supporting elements in a separate parallel path. This is a challenging endeavor. The biggest challenge is you have to staff this and fund it, not just for the life of the project, but long-term, because once it's built, you're going to need to support it, improve it, and maintain it, something that is challenging for most organizations. And then you have to maintain focus and involvement over a multi-year project, basically a 4-year effort to build and develop all these things and get them working together before you can really replace everything in total. So this is a challenging option, and I'll be very frank here. Most clients fail in redevelopment efforts for systems as large as a records management, a court case management, or a jail management solution. It's challenging, and try to rebuild all three is difficult. The next option is a single solution. Go out to the market and purchase a system that does it all. The biggest challenge here is that there are very few options, and of those options, it's really marketing hype. The systems themselves come from different acquisitions. For instance, Tyler is a vendor, and they do court case management. Well, they bought another company that does records management, and they're now in a 4-year effort themselves to integrate that as one product. So it really gets down to, when you look at those really 3 vendors that offer that holistic solution, there are compromises. If you go with Tyler, you're going to get a good case management system, but you're going to get a very old, dated records management system that's not going to meet the law enforcement functionality that you're looking at. So this is, of the options, the most difficult to find on the market. The best of breed options, going out and procuring an RMS, a JMS, and a CMS, and the supporting tools from the vendor that has the best solution. There's a couple ways you can approach it. You can do it through multiple RFPs, multiple contracts. You can also go through a prime contractor and bring it in. The biggest challenge here is it requires a lot of detailed cross-agency information and integration between the vendors, and that needs to be clear in your procurement methods and your contracts so that all the vendors are clear on their responsibilities. The fourth option is a best of breed, and this would be to go out and buy your RMS, your case management, your JMS, and then build everything else yourselves. And although that sounds more attractive, and it sounds like it might be the least expensive option, it's actually the most expensive option, because you have both the vendor efforts that you're managing and you have internal efforts. You have to bring on the internal development staff, and then you have to coordinate and make sure all that works together. As we looked at these options, we put a comparison chart together over the general high-level categories that you'd look at an acquisition or a program effort. The things that you see on the left, program cost, we took the lowest cost item, which is the single solution, and then rated the other solutions against that in terms of increase over that cost. So you can see the rebuild option is a little bit more than the baseline. The best of breeds slightly more than the hybrid, as I said, is the most expensive option, and at 13, almost 14%. The maintenance cost is a big factor. The best of breed is actually the lowest cost there, and you can see the highest cost is that hybrid option. And again, that's because you're paying vendor support and you're paying for ongoing staff that is necessary to maintain it. The 5-year cost, the capital cost of the project and the operational cost for the first year and a half of the operations. And all of the program length, as you see on the third line from the bottom, ranges from 54 to 60 months. So it's a pretty extensive effort regardless of what you look at. The team evaluated the benefits, and we categorized which approach had the most benefits. That's just a pure numerical value. There's more detail behind that if anyone's interested. And then one of the big factors is the risk. Both the rebuild and the hybrid option are very high risk. The single solution is average risk, primarily because you're going to really have to selectively choose what vendor you want, and working through your agencies to get that information and get it settled and agreed upon by the agencies is going to be challenging. And then to fill those gaps in that area where that one system is lacking provides additional risk. For compromise, the single solution is the only issue there. And for burden on agency staff, it's really in terms of bringing staff on, training them, retaining them, keeping them focused and on task, and delivering through a rebuild effort, and then within the hybrid option through the phases of that rebuild effort. That is an overall some thumbnail, excuse me, of the presentation. I would welcome questions at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Kalen. As soon as we get everybody back on the screen, I'll call on anyone who has questions.
Mr. Kalen, can you end your screen share for us so that we can get everyone on screen, please?
Oh, my fault. Sorry about that. I was sitting here.
Sorry, thank you. Thank you. Are there questions, Mr. Kalen, at this time? Anyone? Member Metzger.
On one of his first screens, he talked about programmable. And I want to know what he means by programmable. In addition, he talked about customizations. Are we talking about customizations, or are we talking about the ability to configure?
Mr. Kalen is on the screen. Can you see him, Member Metzger?
No, I cannot.
Okay. Thank you.
It's okay, as long as he answers.
All right, sure.
Yes, the first part of that question about programmability is really goes to the customization aspect of it. Whether or not the system can be, configurability. There's a big difference between configurability and customization. It goes to the configurability. The more configurable a system is, the less customization that you need to do. So ideally, you want a system that is more configurable. And in the best of breed option, those best of breed systems tend to be the best of breed because they are more configurable and you require less customizations. So that's one of the key factors that played into that. Does that answer both of your questions?
Yes, I have additional questions if I can.
Yes, please go ahead.
We talked about integration. So if you do best of breed, you've got what experience is out there in the industry to know if there's integration available between these top applications that do totally different things. So we'd have to have those integrated. So are there other organizations, other counties within the United States that have experience with integrating these? And if so, what was their success?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. First, I'm going to answer it a little bit differently. There actually is within that option a integration component where you would acquire an integration vendor that would come in and actually work on the integration for you, an integration environment such as Software AG, Red Hat Fuse. There are a number of capabilities out there that do that. And that vendor would work with each of the partners so that if you have an incident report that comes from the RMS system and would go to several others, for instance, it goes to the prosecutor, it goes to the court, it goes to public defense, that integrator would take and be responsible in their integration environment to build the business workflow that would move it to all those places, instead of trying to actually integrate those systems one-to-one, which would just result in a big spider web of things. And the second piece to your question was, are there ever other government agencies out there that have done this? And there are several, both at the state and local level, that have taken this approach. It's probably the more common approach where agencies want to maximize, where counties want to maximize their agency features and functionalities.
So when we have a JMS, an RMS, and a CMS, and you have got annual costs for each one of those, as well as upgrades, any enhancements, any immediate emergency releases that have to be done from security or various other reasons. So would that integrator vendor be responsible to help with those?
Yeah, actually, it ends up being a workflow item. And what you would do, instead of having a team of developers, those types of tools are more configurable than a development shop would be. So your configuration manager, typically a position that gets applied with this type of implementation, would just go into the integration environment and configure it to accomplish whatever those changes or upgrades were needed. And the costs that I showed earlier on maintenance costs with the best of breed is lower because that configurability is taken into account there.
So have you taken into account, we have a very customized, I mean, it's internally built, right? Or we've got kind of a hybrid as it is today. Have you taken into account all the customization, the uniquenesses that we have within our current system? And are we going to be able to bring those forward to do out of the box versus a customization? Because we want to avoid, as you identified, and anybody who's worked on these, we know that customization is not something we want to do. So what's the percentage of out of the box that we could anticipate?
Yeah, rough estimate, I'd say, and I see this in most of my clients, about 75 to 80%. You guys are probably on the 75% range of out of the box functionality. But with the integration environment, you're getting up to probably 95% what I'll call out of the box with those configurations. And the other 5% we talked about with all the different groups, that 5% is probably business process that you should change, frankly.
And that was going to be my next question. What's the possibility? I mean, if we go in that direction, we know that we potentially have to change business processes. And I guess my question would be, what's the appetite for that? And do you have any idea?
The group was pretty optimistic on it. I mean, they want to be able to accomplish the business functions that they need to do, but they would really embrace saving a lot of steps in a number of those processes that they do today because of the limitations of the system.
So we have not done an internal review of our processes to see what we could streamline, which would certainly be something I would think we would want to do in advance.
You would want to do it as you were pursuing your procurement. That's something that, while that's out on the street, while you're evaluating it, you could take the high level process documentation that we provided and expand that out. You'd have to dedicate a small team of business analysts to help the agencies, but that's something that frankly, I strongly recommend all my clients get that done, because one of the first things you'll do if you were to get the vendors on board, is you'd sit down and go through a requirements vetting effort, and all of that work will pay dividends in that requirements vetting.
And now my last question then would be, what's the likelihood of being able, I mean, I have 60 months to get it done, but we'd have procurement process for each one of these. So would we potentially see contracts coming up at various times? So that could be complex, I would think. Is that correct?
It is complex, but the time frame that you saw on the comparison chart includes all the procurement efforts, the contracting efforts, the vetting, the requirements work, and the actual implementations. Each of the systems takes anywhere from 12 to 24 months to implement, and all those would go in parallel. And then there's some other work that would be done with your supporting infrastructure before and after. So there's about 15 to 17 months, if I recall the plan off the top of my head, of actual requirements definition, procurement, and contracting.
All right, I promise this is my last question. Do we have the staff to do this?
Not at this time. And one of the cost elements in all of the budget figures were additional staff that would be required to handle it. So in the cost comparison numbers, the staff costs are included in that to do it.
Thank you. Anyone else like the floor for questioning? If not, thank you, Mr. Kalen, for all your hard work and all the information you provided for our committee. And thank you for this good report. And thank you for the members of the committee who've been working on this all along.
Thank you
Yes,
very much.
thank you very much. It was very, very insightful.
Thank you. With the indulgence of the Finance Committee Chairman and the Executive Committee, I'd like to move to page 4 and entertain a couple items for action under items H, B, and C, which are under the County Administrator's report, so that we can accommodate Mr. Holden and the amount of, he spent a lot of hours with us lately, being patient and waiting his turn through many committee meetings. And I know he has a busy schedule, so if we could deal with items B and C at this time, Ms. Rodriguez, I appreciate it. Is there any objection? If none, then let us go ahead and proceed. Thank you.
I'll go ahead, Patrick, and Zach off. Mr. Dietmeyer, I'm sorry, is in the room as well. Thank you, committee, for indulging this request. I'm moving ahead to a portion of my report, item H1B. I'm going to request approval of an abatement ordinance abating taxes on property purchased by Rivian Automotive, and there is information for your review on pages 75 through 89 of your packet.
Is there a motion to approve? Motion by member Kaisley, second by member Woolrap. Any comments, questions, or discussion? If none, all in favor, please raise your hand. And opposed? And the motion carried.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll move on to item H1C, which is request approval of an abatement ordinance abating taxes on property purchased by Brandt Industries. Information on pages 90 and through 92 of your packet.
Is there a motion to approve? Motion by member Schaefer, second by member Kaisley. Any comments, questions, or discussion? If none, all in favor, please raise your hand. And opposed? Motion has carried. Thank you. At this time, we'll return to our regular agenda and a report from our Finance Committee Chairman Zollner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Finance has several items tonight for action. First one is B1A, request approval of an ordinance by the McLean County Board amending the McLean County Code, specifically Chapter 108, Personnel Policies and Procedures, Article 5, Position Classification Plan and Pay Plan, Section 46. This deals with overtime payments. I'd make that motion.
Motion by Vice Chairman Solner. Is there a second? Second by Member Woolrab. Comments, questions, or discussion? If none, all in favor, please raise your hand. And opposed. Motion has carried.
All right, next item is B1B, request approval of a resolution establishing the budget policy for fiscal year 2021. There were several changes made in there. Most of them were clerical, but there were some other items. I'd make that motion.
Motion by Chairman Solner. Is there a second? Second by Member Barnett. Comments or questions? Discussion? If none, all in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Opposed? Motion has carried.
Next item, B1C, request approval of Schedule A calendar for preparation of the fiscal year 2021 budget, 5-year capital improvement budget, and the recommend 3-year budget. I so move.
Motion by Chairman Solner. Is there a second? Second by Member Schaefer. Comments, questions, or discussion? If none, all in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Opposed? Motion has carried.
Last item is D, request approval of an ordinance of the McLean County Board establishing the annual salary of the circuit clerk, the auditor, and a coroner, and I so move.
Motion by Chairman Solner. Is there a second? Second by Member Metzger. Comments, questions, or discussion? Member Kaisley.
I have a feeling that the Finance Committee was overtaken by concern over the current economic conditions. And I think that these conditions are likely to abate and go away, although I don't have any crystal balls that no one else has. But I do think that the size of the jobs of being coroner and clerk of the circuit court, at least, are growing greater rather than lessening, and that it's short-sighted to leave the pay levels for those offices as they have been. I would favor a series of small raises each year for the 4-year term. And I think that is borne out by the long range economics of this country. And therefore I'm opposed to cutting pay and leaving pay at the same level it has been for the last 4 years. You get to the point, if you don't make periodic changes, that your salaries get more and more out of sync with general economic conditions, and then you have to have a big raise in pay to get it where they should be. So I'm opposed to not giving pay raises to these people. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have a comment? Discussion? If none, all in favor, please raise your hand. And opposed? We have
So I've got,
5-3 vote.
Erickson,
I've got
Casey,
Paisley, Schaefer.
and Chuck.
Motion has carried. Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez.
Thank you.
All right, that is all that we have today from the Finance Committee. There'll be several items presented to the board. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. We'll move on to the report of the Health Committee, Chairman Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Health Committee has no items for action today, and I don't believe we'll have any items for action for the board next week.
Thank you. Report of the Land Use and Development Committee, Chairman Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. The Land Use and Development Committee has no items to be presented for action, and we will have one item to be presented to the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Report of the Transportation Committee, Chairman Kaisley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have one request for approval of a capital assistance grant for show bus. And I move that.
That can be found on pages 54 through 71. There's a
Yeah.
motion by Member Kaisley, second by Member Gordon. Comments or questions? Discussion? If none, all in favor, please raise your hand. And opposed? Thank you. Motion is carried.
We have a number of items to present to the board next week. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll move on to the report of the Property Committee. Chairman Barnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Property brings no items of action to Executive Committee this month. One item I would just mention for information, Glazner Beach out at Cumlara Park will not be able to be reopened for the foreseeable future. One of the items that you need in order to properly run a beach is lifeguards. And right now, the Red Cross is not certifying or recertifying lifeguards this year due to the current COVID-19 situation. So because of that, we're unable to open the beach out at Cumlara Park. Should that situation change as we go throughout the summer, we'll continue to monitor that. But just wanted to mention that to the Executive Committee for your information.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the explanation. I report of the Justice Committee, Chairman Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Justice Committee brings no item for action to the Executive Committee this afternoon. We will have one item to present to the board next week. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. We'll return to the report of the County Administration. Ms. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Chairman. I will go to an item to present for action, item H1A, which is request approval of an ordinance of the McLean County Board setting salaries of the members of the McLean County Board out of the recommendation from the County Administrator's Office. The memo and document is for your review on pages 72 through 74 of your packet.
Is there a motion to approve? Member Schaefer, is there a second? Member Woolrab, comments or questions? Discussion, Member Woolrab?
Yeah, just verifying, this is no increase to these salaries, is that correct?
As I understand it, that's correct.
Correct. Correct. Thank you.
Member Metzger?
And no increases in any per diems or mileage or anything of that nature?
Correct.
That's correct. Any other comments or questions? If none, I'll call the question. All in favor, please raise your hand. And opposed? Thank you. Motion is carried.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a report under item H3A, which is our report on recent employment activities, page 93 of the packet. If anyone has questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you very much. Anyone? Okay. We'll move on to other business and communication. Anyone? Well, I would like to, I'm sorry, Ms. Member Woolrab.
Maybe you're going to address it, Mr. Chair. I was going to ask a question about the reopening document from Peoria. Thank you.
Thank you. On Friday, as all of you know, I participated along with County Board Chairman in about 11 county area and with the mayors on a video conference in which was presented to us the plan which you all have possession of that I sent out, that was proposed by the mayor of Peoria, County Board Chairman of Peoria, and the Director of Health from Peoria. And that plan was spelled out, and I looked at it. I know there's been basically it is a proposal that restructures some of the phasing. It's based mostly on data. The theory behind it, a lot had to do with the location of the healthcare centers and the hospitals in that area, feeling that there was a possibility and a suggestion to have a subsection of the territory or district that Governor Pritzker came out with his 4-district plan for the state of Illinois. There were some qualifications and determined for these counties and for the district which would move forward the governor's phases as part of his reopening of Illinois plan. This was suggested as an alternative. I can't emphasize enough that it is just something for a suggestion or something for our governor to consider. And there has been some support for this plan. I have, as I told you in my email to you, feel that it is something that is worth the governor to consider. It has some alternatives to it. All I'm asking for you is your opinion and whether or not, if there is a consensus to bring this forward. And if that would be the case, I would take it for stand up to our committee for an action item. The action item would be solely to write a letter of support to the governor for his consideration in this plan. I want to tell you, I really appreciate all that Governor Pritzker has done. It's a very difficult job being in the position he's in and the tough decisions has to have made. And he has a lot of medical assistance and advisory with him, but this is a possibility for local involvement. And maybe it's tailor-made a little more, and this plan would be tailor-made a little more for us to have the opportunity to earn, I want to say that it's like a merit system more. If the data and the test results and all came back, they would also give us an opportunity to move forward a little quicker, not necessarily that much, but that's a suggestion for the plan without getting into too many details. I would like to have your comments and reactions to it. I've had some calls today, and I do appreciate the calls from the board members and emails that I've had, but I'd like to throw this out just for discussion and see whether or not I have a consensus to move further with it. Is there anyone who would like to reply? Member Barnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would be supportive of moving this forward for further discussion, but one of the things I would like to see us do in addition to this, and I don't know if we can make this an action item maybe for a executive stand-up meeting before our next county board meeting, but I would like to see the county develop, and maybe this is something staff would be able to do, have a letter developed that gets sent to Health and Human Services as well as to the Illinois Department of Public Health, requesting that the testing site at the Interstate Center remain open or is reopened. I think having that testing site here and available for our county and the surrounding communities and the surrounding counties is going to be critical in moving any reopening plan forward for this area of the state. And we're not going to be able to reopen and get back to normal unless we're actively testing folks and making that available to people. And it's going to be hard to do that when they're taking our testing site away.
Would you like to then have this be considered as a separate item of action for approval to be presented to our board if there is a consensus?
I would be happy to make that motion if there is a consensus amongst the members of executive committee.
Well, if with your permission, we can open discussion on both of these situations, these items at the same time. Anybody that has comments and feedback for me? Member Metzger?
I would agree with Member Barnett. However, I'm not sure we can wait to send a letter. They're talking about closing this in like 2 days from now. So I'm not sure if this can be expedited, because I don't think we want to wait until it's closed, because once it's closed, it's hard to get things back.
Other comments? Member Schaefer? Sorry.
I don't know if you guys know this or not, but my first degree is in occupational safety. And one of the things we had to do was not only do coursework, but we also had to prepare in disaster drills. And we also had to study environmental health, and actually, I think that was probably one of the hardest classes I had when I was in college. And my other degree is in computer science. So right now I'm kind of reading a lot and blending the health issues and the data issues. And I don't necessarily agree with all of the restrictions that are on some of these things that we've had. I don't disagree with other ones. So I think that there are areas we can move forward in. However, I am not supportive of doing this. I believe that the governor has much more expertise behind what he is saying and what his plan and how he came up with his plan. And he has actually listened to other areas to a point, but he is the one that has the resources behind it. Whether, you know, a mayor or even another, you know, health department in Peoria is saying that our Board of Health meeting is tomorrow, and I am your representative for the Board of Health, and I'm sure that this may become a discussion tomorrow. I will bring it up to see how the Board of Health actually feels on this whole issue, because, you know, they also have input as to how the health department, you know, how to direct the health department and moving forward on some of these things. So right now, I am not supportive of doing this. I don't feel comfortable with that. I think that, oh, and also my oldest one is a pharmacist at one of the top 10 hospitals in the country, and has told me, for months we've been talking about some of these issues. And so I guess I'm getting a little bit of different insight than maybe some other people have from that. And so that's why I'm not going to support this. And, you know, my opinion is I understand we all want to get back to normal. There is not going to be that kind of normal. And I think that it's too soon, too early, and it's moving too quickly. And so that's just my opinion. And so that's why I'm not going to support this.
Okay, thank you. Other opinions? Member Gordon, I think you were next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to begin with a question. The plan looks to be rather comprehensive, but I am wondering how much room for editing or changing or amending there is in this plan. You wanted feedback from members of the executive committee as well as the full board.
Yeah.
I'm looking at a sheet that I printed out a little bit ago. I have 7 items. Now, not all of them are top priority by any means, but I do have some questions and some suggestions as well as some concerns, some of which I think have been articulated to a degree by Member Schaefer. But my basic question is, how much room is there for editing of this plan? And how much leeway do we have to propose substantive, though not extensive, changes? I'd like to know that before I'm going to send you my comments anyway. But yes. I'm wondering how much difference they're going to make. How much option is there for making changes in the plan, as you said it to us?
Yeah, that's a good question. My own answer would be, after sitting in on the video conference, is that the option very simply is the governor's and his staff on any type of editing or changing or rephasing this plan. If he were to choose and make a decision to go forward with it and put this in a plan, it also would create a subsection from his current district. This would be in some ways in conflict with the phase-in program that he currently has. Whether or not we'll get to the point statewide where the governor will allow local entities, local areas and governmental areas to adapt their plan according to the scientific evidence that they have and input they're getting from the medical community. I don't know. And I don't know that anybody does. The only other thing I can tell you for your information is that this plan was submitted already by the proposers of the plan. And there have been already some letters of support from various counties and the 11 county group that done this and various mayors. Other than that, it is just for consideration presented to the governor. I'm sure that the plan could be adjusted as needed to be, if it is even entertained as a possibility.
So I guess, yeah, thank you again, Mr. Chairman. I guess I was asking the version, the plan as you sent it to members of the county board.
Yes.
Is that amendable? Can we make suggestions that can still be incorporated before it goes anywhere? Because if not, I'll send you my ideas and they end up on a shelf.
My only consensus I was taking whether or not that the county board would want to vote next Tuesday to send a letter of support for this plan that was presented. If the county board wants to come up with a different plan or edit this plan and send the total edition of a plan to the governor for his consideration, that would be up to our board. And I don't have any other clarification for you than that. It wouldn't require us to take action. It would require us to maybe require us to have a special committee meeting to even try to get that accomplished. So right now, I'm just trying to take a consensus on the plan as was sent to you. I hope that answers your question in somewhat of a satisfactory manner. Member Solner, I believe you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the hard work that you and the other county board members have done, mayors. I know that the rural mayors have been looking for this information, so I appreciate you doing that. I believe you're going to have a video chat with them tomorrow night.
Sure.
Again, I think it's something that not only the small town mayors, but the small town residents and retail establishments are looking for also. I just hope that the governor will listen to this, at least take it into somewhat consideration. Do I understand you're going to present this to our legislators and they are going to send it on to the governor? Is that correct?
The plan was basically sponsored, as I said, by the Peoria, Jim Artis County, Peoria Mayor, Andrew Rand, and Monica Henriksen. I'm Andrew Rand, County Board Chairman, Monica Henriksen, the Director of the Health Department for Peoria County. It was also signed, as you can see, the letter of support for this. There are legislators who are very aware of this and have also supported this plan. I can't give you names. The only one I know that was in on the video conference was a Representative Spain, Ryan Spain. I believe he's from Western Illinois area, and he did participate in this conference and did show support for it and introduced it at that time. I know that other state representatives are aware of this, as now obviously the governor's office is too. Anyone else? Member Woolrab?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm completely in sympathy with the businesses and their owners. I come from a business family myself, and the thought of someone losing their business and their employees, their livelihood and their whole life's work is just horrifying. But I have to say that this plan, I'm curious, and I'm so glad Member Schaefer brought this up. It seems to lay an awful lot of responsibility on the local health departments. And I'm just wondering what room we have in our own health department to take on what's outlined in the plan. And I bet we're one of the more well-funded health departments in the vicinity that's outlined in the plan. So I'm wondering how the small counties would do that, but that's outside the scope of McLean County. And it requires it seemingly that we reinvent some of the wheels that the governor already has put out on the IDPH website, the dashboards, the digital hubs, virtual plan process review kind of stuff. That by the time those things get created or recreated, I'm thinking, that can't be done overnight. And wouldn't we be about at the same timeline as what the governor has for the phase 3 out there at the end of the month? I mean, certainly this can't be done in a matter of a couple of days. So that is a portion of my comments. I have others that I will send you specifically, but I'm curious also, when you say that some people have signed off on the plan already, have you or has McLean County indicated that we're already in favor of this?
No, only verbally, from my opinion, was that it looked like a good plan that I would bring it to our board. I don't feel that I'm in a position to do this and speak for our county board. And that's why we're discussing it now. I'm just looking for a consensus to see if the county board is interested in sending a letter in support of this specific plan. And I am talking about the specific plan that was sent to the governor. If there are other ideas or our own county board wants to develop their own plan or idea and bring it, they would probably have to go through our executive committee. That's fine. All I need tonight is a consensus whether you want us to move forward and bring this to our board next week with the question of, do we want to send a letter of support? Purely that, and it's a letter for support of the plan that I sent to you. And tomorrow night, the County Mayors Association will entertain that and may decide to send a letter of support as a group, or they may decide to do it on their own individually. I believe we've had at least one local mayor, and I think maybe 2 that have already sent their letters of support for this plan. So that's all I have. I don't want to,
Mr. Chairman,
do this very long, but I will.
Mr. Chairman.
Member Erickson, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I am calling on you.
All right, thank you. I didn't know if you saw my hand or not, so I appreciate that. No, I appreciate the fact that there's an effort to get a plan. I am, contrary to some of the other members, we need a plan. I have also submitted a plan through our rules that I gave to the county administrator on Monday, which is mirroring the plan that was approved in Clark County. The reason that I submitted it was not as a spite to the chairman, for whom I have much respect. The reason I submitted it was I don't think the governor's ever going to approve anything, and I think counties in this state are starting to go it alone. And that would be my preference if that's what we need to do. But I would just let the press that might be listening to this and others know that there is an alternative plan and that I have submitted it. And I just wanted everyone to know. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Listen, I don't want to continue this discussion too long because basically there was only one question, 2 questions. But my question was, if there's a consensus to move forward to our board for consideration of signing a letter for this specific plan that was submitted to, and I need a consensus. That's all I need to make a determination whether we go forward. If it's okay, I just soon just go around and ask your vote so I'll know what to do. I've also had some input from some other board members, and unless I hear otherwise, then you'll hear from me whether or not it's a decision to bring this further or not. And then secondly, after that, I'd like to come around and get a consensus to see if you support Mr. Barnett, maybe composing a letter to go to HHS. So if we could do that at this time, that's all I really need right now. So I have an input, can I guess there's different ways to do this. Let me just do it this way. Maybe I can just count real quickly. Raise your hand if you believe that you would like for us to take this to the board for consideration of sending a letter in support of this plan as you have in front of you right now without editing. And I'm just going to count. 4, And raise your hand if you feel that this is not necessary or do not support that at this time. Yeah, 4 and 4. Okay, thank you. Well, we're 4 and 4. I'm going to pull some of the other board members and we'll take it from there. Thank you this time. Is that conclusive enough for you? Definitive enough for you for this evening? I'll contact you all and come up with a decision. This is obviously not an action item. It's just a consensus that I am taking. So really, there's no rules that apply here. It's just to give me a feeling of where we are with this and what we want to do. And I'll be happy to discuss it more individually, and I will try to discuss with the rest of the board members this time. On the other hand, I'd also like to have a raise of hands if you are supportive of Mr. Barnett, Member Barnett, composing a letter for us to review and present to the board for approval to send on to HHS. So if you're in favor of that, please raise your hand. 2, 3. Okay, and Member Barnett, I'm assuming you're in favor too. Thank you. Would you like to comment?
Yes.
Okay. And that looks like there's a majority of the consensus there. And so we can discuss this. And if you have other members of the board you'd like to talk about this too before we bring it further, that's fine. Thank you. This is an informal poll is all it is. It's like a straw poll. And thank you for your input on that. Does anybody else have anything else that they would like to present tonight for other business?
Member Barnett.
I'm sorry, Member Barnett, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to echo what Member Metzger had said. I mean, I do think it's good that we send a letter, but still, they're going to be closing this testing facility down on Thursday. So if any of the members of the executive committee or the board as a whole who may be watching this evening have a moment to call our local elected representatives, whether they're from the General Assembly or our local representatives in Congress, I would encourage you to do that. We definitely do not want this testing center to go away. This is a vital need that we have here in the community, and we should do all we can to try to keep it open. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The only other business that I'm sorry, Member Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question on something that dates back, I think, 2 months now. Back in March, when you issued the emergency, if I can remember the exact emergency disaster declaration, of course, you made reference to the fact that there's an alternative housing plan, and that because of safety and security considerations, you didn't, the county did not want to send that out to county board members electronically. At this point, I guess I have some hesitations about coming into the building, although I'll wear the mask and then some. But is there any way to get a copy of that? Is there any change in the inclination regarding sending that plan electronically? I would prefer not to come into the building unless it's absolutely necessary, or unless it's an awfully big plan, if I can pick up a copy at the hut. Is that a possibility?
Boy, you're asking questions. I think the determination was already by the Emergency Management Agency that was not to be sent out. However, I would be happy to meet with you or talk with you about this as a member of the Emergency Operations Center and to discuss some possibilities on that. Because, you know, the plan has a basic part to it that's filed every 2 years and approved with the IEMA, with our Illinois Emergency Management Agency. And then the plan has basics to it. And then it is tailor-made by our Emergency Operations Center specifically to provide for this situation that we're in now. And the alternate housing part of it then actually requires our emergency manager and his staff to go out and obtain the housing sites. And they are specifically there and approved in cooperation with the sites. And of course, funding is provided through us, as we voted on, through our county. And then hopefully, maybe sometimes some recovered by FEMA. There's a site that is established for isolation purposes. There's a site that is established for quarantine purposes. There is a site which the hospitals incorporate in cooperation with emergency management will find and obtain in case they have have too many patients in their hospital at that time for isolation or for hospitalization purposes, which have to be maintained. The emergency management then goes out and also has to provide, obviously, medical provisions and medical practitioners and everything for these sites when needed, including monitoring and testing and food and water, and that all has been set up. The reason they don't like to share the sites are number one, for privacy, and for other reasons that go along with it, so that people aren't taking up things. Now, I'll tell you also that there are, as we did last month in exec, our manager for PATH, Karen Zangerly, promoted the fact that for the homeless, there are other sites that we had. So in total, there are 3 or 4 more sites that PATH has that are different, in which they can put people and house them. Now, not necessarily for isolation purposes, but they can house them for other reasons. So there is a little bit of confusion there. Now, I know, Member Gordon, that you inquired to some of us about what provisions are there for the homeless, and it's basically from our shelter situation. Yesterday, I called both directors of both Home Sweet Home and also Salvation Army shelters again to follow up with this. They are, Home Sweet Home is still taking in some new residents, and they have had no positive cases, and they are obviously working very difficult, putting in a lot of time into working into providing social distancing and proper hand washing, etc. The Salvation Army has done the same thing. They've been able to do that. The director out there told me that they even have a few extra beds available for men right now. So we've been trying to keep in touch with all this and see what alternative sites that they have. That's all we have. I can talk to you more about it if you need more information. But they pretty much like to operate that way. Now, the other situation that came up was Peoria. And Peoria, as we talked about last month, and I showed, was able to obtain an extra $500,000 from one of the block grants that's provided by HUD. And this is for emergency sheltering. So that is a different situation. They had money, and so they did come up with a site downtown, which they chose to name, which is that's their choice and their operation. I've had a call in them today to see where they are and how much use they've had. Hopefully, maybe I can do that and share that with you, just to compare. But our operations have been going very well, very fortunate that we have not had any positive cases in our shelters or our nursing home. But we have to compliment our nursing home for running as well as they've done. It doesn't mean that we're not going to. It does mean, though, to answer your question, that we are set up and ready to go. In our emergency operations center, and members that are participating in that include also our hospitals, our health department, our universities. Reports come from various organizations who are all part of this emergency operations center, and the reports are given 3 times a week. So I don't know if that helps you or not, but that's where we are. There are plans in place. We're very happy. I think they've done a great job with it. We just haven't had to do it. But we're set up, and it doesn't mean we won't. But I do believe, and I want to compliment the shelters and the nursing home for the job that they've done in trying to avoid any possible cases so far.
Well, I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And I'll probably be back in touch with you to see about possibly further information, but that's certainly added to what I already knew, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you. basically that IEMA plan that is filed, our local emergency plan. Once we did the declaration, they activated that operation. We have a mobile unit. Over the years, our emergency management agency has had over 50 to 100 volunteers who have also participated in other disasters around the state. And so they were immediately activated and went out and helped with the National Guard and the Illinois Department of Public Health in setting up the testing site. And so we're pretty well equipped and ready to go, and do have support for anything that's COVID related. Maybe that's the best way to explain it. Anyone else have any questions or other business? Well, it's another long meeting we've had. Let me see about paying bills at this time. We have bills that have been reviewed and approved and presented to us. Two sets of bills from the auditor. One is from regional planning in the amount of $10,775.45. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by member Metzger. Is there a second? Second by member Woolrab. Please raise your hand if you approve that bill. Secondly, there are bills in the amount of $153,168.74, which includes general fund, shared sales tax, and Veterans Assistance Commission bills. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by member Schaefer, second by member Gordon. Thank you. Any comments or questions on the bills? Please raise your hand to approve. And it looks like the motion to approve the bills has carried. Thank you very much. Does anyone else have any comments to add to tonight's meeting? Member Schaefer?
Like I mentioned earlier, our Board of Health meeting is tomorrow evening or late afternoon. And so if you have any questions that you would like me to pass on to the Health Department Administrator or have discussion for the Board of Health, please let me know before then. Thank you.
Thank you all very much for all the hard work you've done as county board members. We're proud of what we've been able to accomplish, and have a good, safe week, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Good night.